Product management is one of the most sought after careers in the tech sector. Lying at the intersection of technology and business, its core focus lies on solving consumer problems and user experience. I am your host Paras Mehta, and today on India to Germany, we speak with Ajatshatru Kotwal about how to start and build a career in product management. AJ is director and head of product at Here Technologies in Berlin, with several years of experience in product management and business strategy. Welcome, AJ. Thank you for speaking with us.
Hey, nice to be here, Paras.
So, AJ, you have more than 10 years of experience in the area of product management and also in the area of business development, spanning both India and Germany. What is it that brought you to your current role at Here?
Well, this is a long story. So I was basically, like all other Indians, I would say, right? I had the same route, school, engineering, and job. So what I did was I wasn't really interested in doing, let's say, the typical computer engineering jobs because I was not really interested in computer engineering at that point of time. So what I did was I actually was one of the only few people in my colleges who actually looked for an engineering job, like where I could actually build something and actually see it being sold, right? So I was very much into like building stuff. So searched around, managed to find a job in Siemens, right? And when I was with Siemens, I used to actually work in the automation business where we actually used to not only program the PLCs, and PLC is one of those small programmers, those computers that run big factories. I would actually be able to make the program, install it in the PLC, make a factory run. So that was very satisfying to me, right? So when I was in Siemens, now what used to happen was I used to come to Germany a lot. And this was a time where I was not really let's say, any interest in studying abroad, any interest in doing my MBA. But the first time I came to Germany, I was really impressed by the way, just basically the way the country is run, right? The way the people are. And I was in the southern part of Germany where people are generally nicer than people in Berlin, as a lot of people like to say. So I was really impressed, and this happened a couple of times. So what I did then, I had a mentor in the company, and we just started talking, and he was like, "Why don't you come to Germany to do your studies?" And so that was the first step that basically got me here, right, to Germany first before even I could come to here. So I did my MBA then from this college in Berlin, which is called ESMT, the European School of Management and Technology, and it's this really nice business school which was set up just for it was set up actually by the top 30 German companies in the DAX index, right? So I came here, basically started this amazing course for 1 year, right? And when I actually went out for the job market, it just so happens that at that point of time, Here was hiring, and that's where I actually got into Here. It was a post MBA thing, and to be honest, when I got into Here, I was not really very familiar with the way software industry used to work, right? So it was a little new for me, but it's been a really, really, let's say, a really, really happy journey from then till now. And it's been quite a change from me moving from somewhere doing programming for a PLC, installing a PLC, and then making a factory run, all the way to now building products in the software industry. So that's basically how I moved around in the last 10, 11 years in my job. And in that time, it started from, like I said, from engineering. And I also did business development for Siemens for that particular product. So I knew I always had this thing of doing a very product specific role, either from a strategy perspective or building a product perspective, right? And once I came into Here, that's what the starting point for me was. And luckily at that point of time, Here, which is a very, very automotive focused industry or a company, was generally moving away to non-automotive businesses, and that's the business I actually joined, right? So it was a very good fit, and luckily all the stars aligned. So that's how I actually ended up being at Here, right?
All right. And so you started directly after your MBA, and you've been with Here all through this time.
True. I've literally been with this company like 2 months after I passed out of my college, and the reason for that is twofold, and it's like intentional and unintentional. So the first reason is, like I said, I was in this new role where the company was evolving and it was going into something new, right? And normally when that happens is it generally opens up a lot of opportunities for new things to happen, right? And it's not bogged down by your existing bureaucracy, your existing processes, blah, 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 all the things that slow companies down. So that was very exciting for me. And the second thing that happened was it was also going through a, a phase in the life cycle of here where it was being sold off, right? So it was when I moved in, it was a Nokia company. And since from that point of time till now, we've actually gone through three different owners. So it's been good in the sense that we've actually had always, it felt like after every 2 years that it's a new company because a new owner comes in, they have their own objectives, they have their own goals, they have their own long-term vision. So it's the company has always like literally every 2 years has pivoted. Sometimes it's been for the good, sometimes it's been for the bad, but it's always felt like it's been new. So I've always had different roles, and that's always felt exciting. Like I've never really had the feeling that I've been in one company for too long because I've had different teams, I've had different departments, I've worked in different offices, to be honest. So it's always like it kept me busy and it's always kept me excited.
That sounds great. So it seems like a lot has happened and a lot has changed in the company since you joined.
Yes.
Um, and so now you're working as the head of product at here. What is your current role about?
Yes. So I basically came. Let's say I moved into product management about, I would say, 2 years back, right? And there's the like I said, so because here was moving from a non-automotive, or sorry, from an automotive background to a non-automotive background, what started happening was uh, it's it started building newer products on existing IP or existing components. And one of the very major components that we have, which literally only two companies in the whole world have globally, is positioning. Right. This is not the map per se, but this is the blue dot that you see every time you open up any mapping application. Right. Your location on the map. Now, our and this was very exciting for me, right? Because our product was actually built on positioning. So I'm right now the head of product uh, of a portfolio that is literally doing tracking in the supply chain space, right? So what we have is we have a portfolio, end-to-end portfolio of hardware, connectivity, a platform and application that is essentially used by enterprises, companies that make stuff, that have to ship stuff across a supply chain, and the stuff is important for them to keep an eye on because it can either be lost or it can get late, all the different complexities in a supply chain, and we help those companies keep a track of their assets. So that's the like a very high level overview of the kind of product I'm looking after right now and what kind of technology it's built on. So it's a technology, it's built on a core piece of our technology.
All right. So you are the owner. So you sort of, in your role, take ownership of this product and kind of lead a team that works on developing this product further.
Sure. True. So this is what happens. So first of all, just to let you know, our company is a really big company. Like it's almost like we've got 10,000 people now. So one of the disadvantages of that is like leading a team becomes very difficult, right? You can't end to end lead a team. And the ideal scenario for any product manager is to basically have end to end control because you can then decide what do you build, who builds it, and who do you sell it to, right? So from that perspective, I have a control at this point of time. Sometimes, and like I said again, because the teams keep changing, sometimes I had a direct team under me. Sometimes I only had product managers under me, and sometimes it was a mix of both, right? So I've always had, uh, let's say, a product working for me. The reporting lines might have changed depending on the way the company was reorganized. And because the team is so big and the company is so big, right? It will always keep changing. But the overall scope is that I am responsible for building a product, making sure that it is built for a specific industry segment, and this is very important in B2B, right? Because everything is built for industries, and then it's sold into those industries by the right channels. I think that's really important also. So that's the kind of scope I'm responsible for. It's complete end to end, like deciding what to build, defining, sorry, even before than that, defining what to build, deciding what to build, and then shipping it. So literally these three steps.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of responsibility. Um, yeah, so actually, um, when I think of uh, like, so when I think of roles in product, there are different profiles that come to mind. So I keep hearing, for example, of product owners, or I keep hearing of people working in product development.
Mhm.
So what exactly is let's say the role of a product manager, and how is it different from the role of a product owner or from the role of someone who is working in product development? Maybe if have you think these are different, and if so, what do you think?
Sure, sure. So the first thing is, Paris, I think there will never be like one straight answer for this, because this has been going on, I don't know, for the last 10, 12 years. Like these, all of these different roles are so flexible, and every company, depending on the scope and depending on the size, uses it differently, right? And this is also something I also got used to, because when initially you get into product management, or at least when I did, there's no, like there is no, it's not a technical course, right? So there's nothing you can read and technically and say, okay, I've done A to Z, and now I'm a good product manager, right? So initially when I started reading about product management, like every different book that you read has different ideas about it, right? And what should a product manager should be. So again, it's different definitions in different companies depending on the size. The way we do it is also a function of how our company is set up and how our channels are set up. So, and of course, how the size of the team is. So this is how it happens in our company, and probably in other companies also, right? So we generally have a product manager that defines what the product is, right? And so, like I said, those three steps that I mentioned earlier, right? Define, decide, and ship. So when it comes to defining, right, the product manager, it's the product manager's job to decide a lot of different things. Like the first being, okay, what problem are you solving, right? Then after you have that problem defined, you have to know what product should you build to solve that problem. Then you define your market that you play in, and then you define the user segments, the personas that you want to go after, what stakeholders that you want to work with. So this is defined step that the product manager does. Like it's the job of the product manager, right? And then this, after you define the basics, right, then you sort of move to a decide phase, right? Then you decide what do you want to build first. Like literally, like okay, I've defined everything. Now I can't go after everything at the same time. So let me decide what I want to do first. Now this definition, or sorry, this deciding step where I say I want to build an MVP, I want to build it for this kind of customer, and I want to build it in this time frame. This is what the product manager does. Now, how that thing is built, I think that's where a product owner comes in, because a product owner, and again, I'm talking about our company's perspective, is a little more technical than me, right? He probably decides or works with an architect and decides, first of all, the technical architecture of the product, right? Then works with the engineering team and works with them to build the actual product and decides how those products should be built, right? So, like, it's like this, right? I tell a high level feature saying, okay, I want, let's say, for example, I want a customer to come in and I want the customer to experience user management in a certain way. Now, that how that user management is set up is defined by the product owner. He will actually define the technical architecture behind it, and whatever is the engineering required to do that, he will then write tickets for it. Right now, again, this happens in a very big company. Now, in smaller companies, the role of the PO, the product owner, and the PM is 100% like merged. Like there is no PO, there is no PM, right? So that's one. And in that particular kind of smaller startups, or even very big companies that have, like, let's say, more flexible teams, there's mostly just the PM, right? Now, in the case where the PO and the PM are the same guy, right, the PM has to be definitely more technical. Like he has to know the knowledge, he has to know the language of the engineering, he has to talk in the same language. So from that perspective, in startups, you will see the PM also more technically focused, right? He has to know, has to talk to engineering teams in the right way, because they don't have the luxury of hiring multiple people, right? And in that case, right, there's these two roles are overlapped. But in our case, it's not. And I'm guessing in a lot of other companies, there's even more layers to this, right? I've seen companies where there is a product owner, then there's a technical PM, and then there is a commercial PM, right? Again, all of these things are basically to solve for the complexity of the company also, right? So it's different things in different ways. And again, there is no one right way of doing it, right? Because another thing of product management is that you have to, every time you build something, it has to be built in mind knowing your company's limitations and boundaries, right? That's also another important thing.
Yeah, I understand. So thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot for that clear explanation. Yeah, I understand. So okay, there's the product owner, and then there's the product manager, and depending on, for example, the size of the company, these roles might overlap. But of course, in bigger companies, there needs to be a separation, and yeah, that makes total sense.
The other thing
And
in bigger companies is also
yeah,
too many processes sometimes, right? So sometimes I think a lot of bigger companies have roles to sort of come around their own processes, right? So that's also like in a way one of the problems of having too many roles in a bigger company.
yeah, that's true. I understand. Yeah, that's true. Bigger companies, yeah, it becomes more complex. And what do you think are some of the important skills for getting into this area of product management?
So this is like how do I say, like this again, this I don't think I can answer it in a way like, okay, this is what you need, and there is no checklist to this, right? So I think what generally happens is, right, and what every book you will ever read will tell you is that you have to be an all-rounder. Like, and I'm using cricketing lingo here. It's so if you open up a textbook, and I don't know which textbook this, but you see it everywhere, right? People generally draw these three overlapping circles, right? There is a UX circle, and there is a tech circle, and there's a business circle, right? And these three overlapping circles, and their point of intersection, their common point of intersection is called as, this is where all the PMs should be, right? Which means that a good PM or a great PM should know a little bit of business, a little bit of UX, or user research or user design, and should also know a little bit about tech, right? But again, like I said, that's theoretical. That might be true for certain companies, for certain startups, and it's completely valid. But I think in the real world, there's more layers to it, right? So you have to be a lot more, let's say, involved in your company's day-to-day operations. Like, you have to know how your company works. You have to know how your channels work, right? Now, if you're a small company, that's less for you to worry about, right? So that's why a lot of companies start out well, but when it comes time to scale up, that's where they struggle, right? So as those things change, your skill set as a PM should also change, right? But generally speaking, you have to be good in business. You have to know, at least at a very high level, how technology works, right? You have to know about good design and good user experience, right? And more importantly, you have to know, like, what are the right channels for your product to work. And because I'm talking from a B2B scope, right? Channels for us is very, very important, right? We're not like in a consumer business, there's only one channel and there's one customer, right? You publish something and a customer or a consumer opens it up and consumes it. So that's also a difference, right? If you're a B2B product manager or a B2C product manager, your skill sets also change, right? So think of it as I know, like, everybody knows they have these spider graphs, right, where you have multiple variables, and the graph changes based on how your performance is in a certain variable, right? So product manager is basically like a spider graph, and depending on which industry you're in, certain things have to be better than the others, right? So if you're in a startup, maybe your technical knowledge has to be better than any other thing. If you're in a bigger company, maybe your go-to-market knowledge, your product knowledge, your market landscape knowledge has to be better than other things. So it's always different, but it's always underpinned by knowing about business, knowing about tech, and knowing about user experience and user design. And again, you don't have to be an expert in any one of these. Believe me, like, even when I got in, one of my uh, apprehensions was that I don't know a lot about software development, right? So, but again, I don't have to know a lot. You just have to do a little bit of your homework to know what's the best decisions, right? And then you let your POs and your engineering teams refine those decisions when it comes to engineering, right? So it's like literally like being a businessman, right? You just have to know everything, something of everything, and you have to make it work in your, let's say, in your unique sphere of problems, right? If you're in a consumer space or a business B2B space.
All right. So it's actually very interesting to know, yeah, that there are these three things that at least one should keep in mind and maybe try to develop or some skills in these or get an overview of these in order to prepare for such a role. So you yourself, after working in Siemens in India, you came to Germany, did your MBA at ESMT, and then you started working at here and kind of transitioned into a product management profile. Do you think like this is a typical way for someone to transition from a different field into product management, or are there any other ways or any typical ways for people to transition into product management?
Mhm. So I think this, I mean, like I said, like because this is such a non-technical field, so there are multiple ways of transition into it. I have seen so many of my friends, people I know in Germany, transition from various different functions, disciplines into product management, right? Just because they liked it, they just because they had a certain passion about getting into product management. So I have seen people from marketing, people from design, people from technical people, like people who are product owners and architects, and they want to go into product development. They've gone in. So I literally, like I said, there is no formula for this. I think it depends on two things generally. One, it depends on your drive, like if you really want to make that jump. So I think that's the first thing, right? Because you either have heard about it and there's a buzz around product management, that's why you want to do it, or you genuinely have been involved in that product management, let's say, circle, either as a marketing person or as a developer person, and you like it and you want to go into it, right? So that's the first thing, your drive to become a product manager. And then the second thing is, it's if you're smart about it, right? It can in the real world, it can happen generally within a company, right? So I've seen that if you go and apply for a product management job on the market and you're not a product manager, then it's very, very difficult for you to become, it's very difficult for you to sort of successfully even forget about acing that interview, even get successfully applied or get called for an interview, right? So I think the most logical step is if you try to make a jump within your own companies, right? So if you think you're in a big company and there is a good scope in product management, the first step would be to find an internal route into making that horizontal switch. And that's how I did it, right? Not that my role, I was doing business strategy and I was doing business operations and strategy for the first 3.5 years in the company. And that involved doing things like all the business cases and reporting the performance of the company to the board, and nothing to do with product management. But slowly and slowly, like because I wanted to get into it, right, I started basically one, building up my knowledge base, and then started looking at the right internal transfer routes to get myself into that particular position. And once you make that internal switch, and then you have a product manager, let's say a stamp or a label, then it becomes easier for you to also apply externally, right? But if you're a fresher, let's say you're a completely new person who's just now got out of college and wants to do product management, I would say that's probably the most difficult part, right? Because a lot of companies are looking for product manager that have experience. Some of the bigger companies that I know of, like Google and everything, they also have these product management uh, career intakes where they take specific people for product managers, and they make the new product managers shadow the old product managers. But unfortunately, I think that happens very little in Germany. Mostly happens in the US and the UK. So I think in Germany, your best bet is to generally move within companies.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good piece of advice. Thank you. So it's actually also like a chicken and egg problem, right? Because on the other one hand, in order to start, you need the experience, but then without the experience, you cannot start.
True.
So it's, yeah. So yeah, I also understand that it makes sense to actually transition from a different role into this role within the company. That would definitely be easier.
And it's compounded by the fact that the ecosystem in Berlin is basically made of startups, right? Or at least is either like smaller companies, startups, or companies that are in the phase of becoming big, right? So if you think from their perspective, right, they have very little incentive to hire newer people, right? So that also makes it a little bit difficult in Berlin to just hire fresh product managers. And basically, I think a smaller company doesn't want to take that risk, and rightfully so. Like it's difficult to take that risk when you're a small company and your only aim is to succeed and not really train people.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. Yeah, it's true. I mean, specifically talking about Germany, do you think you would advise other people to get into a product management profile? Do you think it's easy to find a job? So you said, okay, for startups, it's difficult, but in general, would you advise people to move into this field in Germany?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think I would. Right? It's really like it's one of those because Berlin in general and this whole culture of having software startups that is the future of the German economy. I mean, I think everybody knows that. I don't even have to tell anyone that the automotive space, which has been the engine of the German economy, plus the Mittelstand, right, which is all of these smaller companies, most of them anyways, who are dependent on automotive, it's not going to go away, but that's going to substantially reduce as the world is going to change into a much more different way of mobility, right? So even the car makers are doing it. They're getting into newer businesses, right? The share nows, the park nows, all of this that you see out there. So as Germany is moving towards a digital future, a more internet-based future, right? I think that's where there is going to be so much scope for product managers, right? So product managers are going to be the new engineers of Germany, as I like to call it, right? It's because all of this time there's so much, and of course there will be a lot of demand for engineers in Germany for the foreseeable future, but a lot of demand for product management is going to blow up as the Berlin startup scene spreads, and I can already see it, a lot of startups coming up already from Munich and Frankfurt, right? So definitely, like product management, I feel is going to be a very, very good career path for people in the future, and it already is right now in Berlin, also, to be honest. But I think if everything goes well, if Germany can keep up this pace, and like it spends the money in the right places, which I think it is. I think Germany has some very, very good, at least it doesn't have that much money as London does in terms of investor money, in terms of angel money, but I think it's building out. I think the government is stepping in and trying to have all of these different programs where startups are funded, or startups are given some seed funding. So all of this is basically laying the foundations of an ecosystem that where 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, it's going to be a lot of product managers needed for this.
That's very encouraging to hear. So I am sure many of the listeners will also hopefully try to transition into this role.
True. And I think as a bonus, I think the language requirement for a product manager role is less German focused. Let's put it this way, right? And myself, and this is coming from me, who's not Germans, any level of confident German speaking person at all, right? I also find it that generally the language requirements for a product manager are generally not that strict when it comes to speaking German, just because a lot of people in the technical field are so diverse, right? You have developers coming from Eastern Europe, India, Germany, France. You have so many UI UX people coming from all over Europe. So it's such a diverse setup, this ecosystem, that you can also generally get by if you don't know German and you only know English, right? So that also, I think that's also uh, a big incentive for other people coming from outside the country, from Germany, countries like India, to come and just basically succeed without worrying about the fact that, hey, I don't know the language.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, learning German definitely takes some time, and it's also a barrier, for starting to build a career here.
True.
So that's very good to know.
Yes, and I think exactly. I think it's a barrier, and to be honest, I think the German government, the German ecosystem also knows it's a barrier, right? So a lot of times, and even if you search around product management jobs in LinkedIn, you will see that a lot of time the requirement says that must be fluent in English, must be really fluent in English. German is preferred, right? Which basically means that if you are able to express yourself well, because you need to as a product manager, and if you are a good product manager and if you have the right experience, the last thing they will ever say no to you will be on language, right? So they will never
Oh,
say no to a person because the person doesn't know German, as long as he's a good PM and can express himself well.
all right. So that kind of brings me to my next question, which is about the hiring process for such positions. In your experience, what is there a typical hiring process for a product management position?
Mhm.
And if so, then what does it look like?
Yeah, so I've again, I know I keep saying this a lot, but it literally depends. It depends from company to company. And so if you think about the earlier question we had, the earlier discussion we were having, Paris, is why do some companies have POs and PMs, and why do some companies only have PMs? And so based on this, because when a company puts out an advertisement for a PM, it can always mean two different things, right? It can either mean I want a PM that can also be technical and can look after the team and set requirements, or in some cases it means I want a PM that who may not be very technical but can overall lead the success of the product, right? So depending on what a company is looking for, I think the interview process really varies, right? You will find the overall steps mostly the same. Like they'll ask you, they'll look at your background, they'll call you, have some Q and A's. They'll probably give you a use case, a case study, right? And you have to present the case study. But I think the difference is that in some cases they will actually give that the content of the case study might vary. Plus, I think in some cases, if they're actually looking for a end-to-end PM who can lead the commercial success of the product, they don't actually care about the outcome of the case study. And of course, it has to be right, but they generally care about how the person thinks about the case study, right? How is the person presenting it? Is his idea clear about launching a product in the market? So I think the biggest thing I can say is don't worry about the steps. Like the steps are going to be different for different companies. What is really important is to understand why a company needs a product manager. This is the first thing you should always ask is what is going to be the scope of product management in this case. Even if the job description makes it very clear, always make sure you ask the HR, because that's the first round. What does the company want out of me as a product manager? And once you get that answer, you should always change your approach to match that requirement, right? If you think the company is looking for a very technical person, your approach should slightly tilt towards that direction. And if you think a company is looking for a complete end-to-end product manager that's going to be responsible for the commercial success, you should not be talking about architecture and the company should be using C or C++. That's not what you should be talking about. You should be then talking about strategy, end-to-end uh, end-to-end outcome of how the product should succeed. That's what you should be talking about. So irrespective of steps, understand what the company wants and then change your approach as per that.
Yeah, that sounds logical. I mean, yeah, I agree. So it could be depending on the requirements of the company, it could be either more technical or more sort of managerial, let's say.
True, absolutely. And it's like I think it's like one of those. Like I said, like it's not a very technical role, though. So it's not like if somebody is hiring for a engineering role or an architect role, and they ask you either do a program code sometime in the interview, or they ask you some technical question, then you're either right or you're wrong. Like it's like 100%. It's like black and white. So it's because it's not that kind of job. It's not that kind of role. So there is not a single answer to this thing. What does company look for when they're interviewing PMs? And if you want a very specific answer, there are multiple apps out there that where it's a community of product managers, engineers, where they actually discuss what are the different questions asked during an interview for, let's say, a company like Facebook or a company like Google, and that can also give you a very good idea. Right?
That's true. Okay. And for specifically for your company, if someone is looking to work for here in a product management role or in a different role, what would be your advice to them? Where should they look for no? What would be your advice to them?
So, I mean, the first advice I would have is, I mean, like I said, understand what the company does. Like, if you think that you are really interested in joining a geolocation company that is going to be building solutions based on location data, positioning data, whatever it's, but the core is always going to be location. If you think that is something that excites you, right, I think that's the first step, right? And if the answer to that step is yes, then the best way to see is we have all of these roles advertised in LinkedIn, right? So that's our primary channel for giving out and advertising roles, right? So that should be your first step. And again, if to be honest and to sort of reiterate what I said, if you are applying to a product manager's role, right, and if you don't have product management experience, it is going to be tough for you to sort of get a positive call for an interview. I think it's just how it is, just to be very, very blunt, right? But if there are other roles that you think suit your profile because you have that background in it, applying through LinkedIn, if you see there is somebody you have as a common friend, asking them for a referral, that generally goes a long way in getting at least an interview call from the company. Right now, unfortunately, or let's put it, I mean, there's a fortunate part and unfortunate part. Unfortunately, we were not hiring as much as we could have if the pandemic wasn't happening, right? For obvious reasons. But we are still hiring some roles, like some really critical roles. So that also shows a lot about the company, that the company is still planning to grow. So if you go online, if you go to LinkedIn, you will see that the company has still put out a lot of roles. And if you feel there's anything that is suitable for anybody who's hearing this podcast, please apply, and then you can always come to me and ask for any advice or any other referral if that what makes sense.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's very nice of you. And would you have any other suggestions for people who are looking to work in this area of product management in Germany? Let's say if people from India or people from other countries.
Mm-hmm. So I think, first of all, if and again, to be honest about this, I think if you're really interested in product management, and if you want to come to Germany, I think the first thing we should do is try to figure out what's the best way of applying, right? So a lot of companies are picking up, especially companies in Berlin are picking up external talent, right? Now, like I said, if you are interested in product management, you should have some experience in product management, right? The other way of doing it is like there's a lot of technical people who also might want to get into product management, and then I think the best thing is to, if you want to come and just break into the job market, apply for a role that fits your background or fits your experience, and after you do that, after you step in the job market, then look around for seeing what's the best way to break into your product management role if you're new into product management. Now, if you're a seasoned product manager, right, I think Germany is still one of those countries that are open and flexible for actually interviewing people from abroad and then getting them in. Right, I think it still has that flexibility, that openness when it comes to work policies and visa policies and all of that, where you don't really have to struggle and fight for a visa and then lose your hair over not getting green card. I think if you're a seasoned product manager, go to LinkedIn, find out the roles that actually match your profile. And if you think the roles and your profiles match, you can generally apply, and the chances of you getting a call back are generally higher, right? I won't say that it's very high since you're not based in the country, but it's as high as any other country outside India, right? No other country would hire external product managers having the size of the economy as much as Germany would, right? So that's my recommendation, right? If you're new into product management, don't think of coming to the or applying for product management jobs in Germany. That won't help. But if you're old, and in fact, if you're new, try to come and try to come based on your existing strengths, and then you can think about breaking in to the product management role. But if you're a seasoned product manager, you have to make sure your experience matches 1:1 with what the companies are asking for, right? Like I said, because Germany is a new is a relatively new tech startup ecosystem, has a very relatively new tech startup ecosystem. They are still looking for experienced product managers.
Yeah, that's very useful advice, AJ. Thanks a lot.
No worries, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, AJ, for sharing your valuable advice and experience with us. That was a lot of very useful information, a lot of useful ideas. I'm sure a lot of listeners will find it very, very valuable.
I mean, I hope they do, and believe me, I hope I said something valuable, and I hope anybody who's listening to this gets something out of this, and I hope it helps them. And I think it's a great platform anyway, as far as that you have this going. I think it's really good. It's a good platform for people to come in and have like really concentrated information for the right kind of topic. I think this is really a good platform that you're generally providing, which unfortunately I didn't have when I was coming here. And if I had, it would really, really helpful. Right?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, that's the idea. So I hope, that people also find it that useful. Yeah, thank you very much. It's actually a very good feedback and a lot of good encouragement.
Awesome. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. That's all, folks. Remember to subscribe to our podcast and check out our blog on indiatogermany.com. See you in the next episode.